All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to People Ops. My name is Devin Dean, and I work for the Central Mountain Small Business Development Center in Salida. And today we are here with Otisa Eads, an entrepreneur and HR and systems strategist consultant. For the next hour or so, Otisa will be continuing her HR series by taking us through fostering an inclusive work environment. We are recording this session, so you can watch it on demand later. And I will be sending out the recording and slides later today, so you can watch them in your own time. But do go ahead and give us a shout with your questions. During the presentation, if you want to type your questions into the chat or come off mute, we can get them answered. But if you prefer to wait, we'll stop the recording at the end, and you can ask your questions off the recording at that time. Next slide, please. So just quickly before we get started, the Central Mountain SBDC offers no-cost confidential consulting as well as free or low-cost workshops, such as this one, and assistance with access to capital. So please reach out if you would like to register for a free consulting session. And next slide. And our center serves Chaffee Lake and Park counties, the three yellow areas in the center of that graphic, but we are part of a 14-center network. So if you do not live in one of those three counties, we're happy to get you in touch with your best local resource. And that's it from me. So with that, it's my pleasure to present Otisa. Thank you so much for being here and continuing this HR journey with us.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. Um, and I'm just excited to be here to talk about one of my favorite, I think I say this every single training, but one of my other favorite topics, which is inclusive culture. And it's something that I talk a lot with my clients with the work that I do with them. And it's just kind of part of my consulting practice. So I'm really excited to be here to talk all about fostering an inclusive culture in the workplace. And I will say, normally when I do this training, I've done this like virtual for 2 hours and I've done an in-person version. There's usually a lot more activities and more ways to practice the things that we're learning. We're not doing that today, but I hope that you can be thinking of different ways that you can either embed this in your workplace, in your work environment, or kind of come away with some different thoughts as you start to build out an inclusive culture in your work environment. So keep that in mind as we go through this together. With almost every training we've done, there's always a quote. And so today's quote is by James Baldwin, who's a wonderful, artist, author, activist, and more. So if you don't know who James Baldwin is, I highly suggest go checking out the different documentaries and films and written works by him. So this quote is, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." One of my favorite quotes. And I put this here because I think a lot of the times when we are talking about inclusive culture, a lot of that times means that we are looking at things with a different lens, different perspective. We're seeing the changes that we may have to embed or make, and we can't do that until we look at it. So that is why I love that quote for this training in particular. Normally we would do introductions and different things, but if you want to just kind of stay off camera and chill, that's perfectly fine. If you want to say hi in the chat, feel free to do so. That's perfectly fine. And for this training, like usual, there's the agreement. So when we do have moments for sharing or Q&A, I just want folks to be aware. I'll highlight some of these, but I'll let you read them in detail. But be respectful and mindful. What's said here stays here. What's learned here leaves here. Be be open-minded. If you want to share experiences, you can. And if you are listening to folks share experiences, just be sure that you assume good intent. So that is what I wanted to highlight for today's session. So part of this, we're going to talk about like what the heck is an inclusive culture? What does that mean? There's going to be different definitions we're going to go over. I will talk about psychological safety, culture competency, the bystander effect, and we'll talk a little bit about allyship. Then we're going to switch gears and talk about, well, how do you maintain an inclusive culture? What goes into that? And I'll share some strategies and tools that you can do. And quickly, I realized I always forget to talk a little bit about myself before we dive in. My name is Otisa Eads. I'm an HR Systems Strategist Consultant. Been doing consulting work for 6 years and having my own practice. I work with nonprofits, small business owners, streamlining their systems, their operations, and helping them along the way with either creating an infrastructure if they don't have it, or figuring out ways to mitigate the different things that appear when you have HR and people operations. So that's a really, really high level summary about what I do. So if you want to participate in the chat, feel free to do so. If you want to come off mute, you can, but I'm just curious for those that are here live, when you hear the word inclusive culture, what comes to mind? And what does inclusive culture look like to you? Or when you see that or hear the word inclusive culture, like what do you picture when it comes to a work environment? So feel free to put your answers in the chat if you would like, and just share what you think when you think of the word inclusive culture. And if you're at home, like you can journal about it. If you take a few minutes to write some words that come to mind. If you've seen this demonstrated, what was that experience like for you? So I'll give you a minute or so to see what comes to mind.
Right, so in the chat we have hearing and listening to everyone, being open to different backgrounds.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Yes. And on social media, I did a post on this. I was on a panel last year, jobs fair. I think it was a job fair for all. It's an inclusive job fair for folks that are part of the LGBTQ community, and we talked about inclusive culture. So I shared a little bit about what that means to me personally and how I've seen that being curated. And so I completely agree with the person that shared that. Yes, hearing and listening to everyone, being open to different backgrounds. Yes. So I'm going to share the definition of what inclusive culture means. An inclusive culture indicates a climate in which respect, equity, and positive recognition of differences are cultivated. Core values are demonstrated in an inclusive culture, which would be representation, receptivity, fairness, collaboration, and contributions. Of course, there's probably even more core values or words you could use, but these are some to think about when it comes to inclusive culture and how that could be carried out in a work environment. So here's some characteristics. I like to share these because sometimes it's helpful for folks to kind of picture what that actually looks like on a day to day. I won't read all of these to you. These are just kind of some high level examples. So I'll share a few. So one of them is the organizational goals are known and employees know how their role fits into the big picture. I think this is very, very important. And the fact that the opportunities to kind of have this conversation or have these reminders is really, really important. Um, and then the other one behind underneath that is the organization has values, communicates those values to employees, and acts in ways that are consistent and in alignment with those values, especially for how an organization or company operates, right? And making sure that folks are aligned with that from the very beginning in their role, but also that that's being, consistently carried out by all parties. For an example, maybe the leadership, it's in, like, for instance, like I'll give you like a silly, simple example of this. If you encourage your staff to have lunch and take lunch breaks, but the leadership team doesn't, that's going to be challenging to maintain that, right? That you want folks to take breaks, you care about their well-being, but yet you yourself do not do that. That's going to be complicated and challenging for them to actually do it because they're like, oh, well, you say this, but you're doing another. So being mindful of practicing what you share with your team, making sure that you yourself are doing the things, even if it's according to policy, procedures, but also culture, norms, and those things. Making sure that you're practicing what you share and what you relay to staff. Employees are treated fairly, and there is consistency in how employees are treated across groups and teams, and there's no sense of unfairness or favoritism. Is also a really important one. And also a challenge, right? I feel like sometimes this can happen without the employer really realizing it, but it's really important to be mindful of that equity is is at the forefront, being mindful of favoritism or perceived favoritism, and keeping that in mind. And then over here to the right, employees are given the tools they need to succeed. Goals are clear, and employees have the confidence they will be able to achieve what is expected of them. I think that's really, really, really important, is highlighting and explaining and sharing what success and thriving looks like in their role, what that looks like from the employer standpoint, from the overall company organization standpoint, and making sure that they're set up for that success. They're set up to thrive from the time they're a new hire and so forth and so on in their journey with the company. And then lastly, which I think is obvious, but harassment, disrespect, discrimination, bullying, unsafe behaviors, and violence are not tolerated in any way. Policies and actions reflect this. So how are you handling complaints? What is this? What is the process for that? How is that being incorporated for change if that needs to happen? If there needs to be change from a policy standpoint, there needs to be a training. How is that how is that consistently being supported? What is the process for that? Also, I think that ties into feedback in general. What is the feedback cycle and loop at your company and organization? Not just for performance evaluations. I like to tell clients those are separate. A feedback cycle and performance evaluations are two different things. So, how are you having that being part of their journey as well? How are you collecting feedback, but also when things do arise, when problems do escalate, how are you handling that consistently? And what does that process look like for both the employees and employers? So a lot of folks say, okay, great, I know what an inclusive culture is, but now what do I do? Where do I begin? And so I tell folks that's really important if you're trying to foster a more inclusive culture within your company, that you place an emphasis on valuing people's abilities instead of limitations. So looking at how are they an asset? What are they bringing to the role, the company? I always say, well, why did you hire them in the first place? What was something that you really enjoyed during that interviewing process and that you're excited to have to be part of your team? So how are you valuing, how are you placing the value on them as an asset, their skills, their expertise that you're leveraging, and not focusing on what they're not doing well or just focusing on their limitations? And so inclusion helps us see things from different perspectives. Inclusivity can encourage creativity, innovation, collaboration, and it's important to find ways that you are fostering that consistently. And you can do that by establishing a sense of belonging for everyone, having empathic leadership or compassion leadership, and focusing on helping one another thrive, not just fit. Or if you've heard from other previous trainings of mine here, I say alignment a lot. So, how are they aligning to the way that you all work, or the norms of working in the company or organization? How are they aligned to the goals, the mission? What does that look like, and how can having an inclusive culture foster that even further? So that's what I always like to share. And then I also tell folks that with inclusive culture, it does come down to trust between the employee and the employer. Here's a quote. Trust in the workplace means your employees enjoy a culture of honesty, psychological safety, and mutual respect. They're proud of where they work and are more willing to go above and beyond for your company or your organization. So here's some tips when considering building trust in the workplace or encouraging trust more with your team. So empower your team by trusting them first, empower each other as coworkers as well. Show your appreciation, show your gratitude. Focus on nonverbal communication and soft skills, as well as the hard skills, right? Encourage coaching and support whenever needed, and asking for feedback. Practice consistency, and these elements here will help you create and foster an inclusive culture. And of course, as always, practice active listening and empathy. I think these are, to me, like the foundational parts in building trust in the workplace, and of course, creating that foundation for inclusive culture to thrive in a work environment. And I know you're probably thinking, why does nonverbal communication matter? If you didn't go to the communication and feedback training, then I suggest you go watch that, because I talk all about that and the importance of having these skills, not just as an employee, but as a leadership member or business owner, it's really important that you're able to do that because it goes a long way when it comes to your staff's development. So I will stop here before I go on a rant, but these are some things to consider when it comes to, trust in the workplace. And then, of course, it's empathy. So, how do you show empathy in the workplace? What does that mean? So, giving your full attention when someone is speaking with you, especially if you're a business owner. This is like a shout out to business owners and HR people, because I'm both. So, I think sometimes when folks bring us, whether it's a question, a thought they want to share, and you're in the middle of something, it's very challenging to stop what you are doing and give your full attention. But I tell folks that if you are leadership, if you're in a leadership position, if you are a business owner, to create the structure and systems for you to be able to have those check-ins with your team, and create those spaces for them to do so. If you can't do an open door policy, then don't say you have an open door policy. Say that they have to set up a time with you, or you create hours where you are able to meet with people, right? And that's shared with folks in an email or announced at a team meeting or huddle. So I want to just say, like, as I'm going through this slide, I'm like, let me just give a little pause here. Like, if you don't have the space every day to do that, that's completely fine. If you're running a business, that's going to be hard to do every single time a staff person has a concern. Or maybe you redirect them to the appropriate person. Maybe if you have an HR person, you say, hey, set up a time to meet with our HR person to talk through this, or get on my calendar this week or next week so I can follow up on this. But right now I have to have a deadline to meet, whatever. So I want to just share that. Like, I don't expect you to be completely accessible and available every single time someone reaches out to you. These are just kind of skills and tools to use to practice empathy when you have this space to meet and talk with a staff person. So also practice active and empathic listening to your team. Again, we talk all about that in the communication feedback training. Be sure to ask the right follow-up and open-ended questions. I think that we underestimate the power behind questions, especially when you're in a conversation with someone. If someone is sharing something that happened to them, or they're just kind of wanting to process something, asking questions can help them. And sometimes people don't need you to fix it or solve it. They need to kind of come to their own solution, and asking questions can help them do that. Consider other people's perspectives. Be thinking of, okay, well, how would this person think about this, or how would this affect this person's role if we do this? This does not mean you have to agree with something that someone is saying, but you can at least see their points of view and acknowledge them. Also, after someone has shared an issue or situation, be sure that you take action, but also just following up is super, super helpful. Um, a lot of the times with my clients, I do this, but even before that, when I was working as an HR manager, I always made sure I followed up with my staff. If we met one-on-one, if they brought something to my attention, if they emailed me, I always said, hey, did you come to that solution? How did that go talking to that staff person? How did this thing go? I always make sure I followed up with them, so they know that, A, I do care, and I want to make sure that they got what they needed. Empathy is not about what you want, but what the other person wants and needs. So any action you take or suggest must benefit them. And that's when you're looking at this from, someone's coming to you, or, you having to kind of serve that purpose of listening. Be thinking of that, right? Empathy is not about you. It's about the other person, what they're going through, and what their needs and wants are, right? So I just wanted to stop here. I think, do we have some questions or comments in the chat? Just want to make sure. Oh, thank you. You were putting the trainings in there. You're the best. So yes, this is empathy to me. I want to say too, is a lifelong skill, even for me. So just be mindful of that and think about how you are in the situation. If someone's bringing something to you and you don't have the bandwidth to sit with them, just acknowledge and say, hey, this is not a great time, but I want to give my undivided attention to you to really work through this. Let's get a time on my calendar, or let's make sure we have time to have coffee or tea or whatever it is. That to me is also being empathetic, because you're sharing where you're at and how you do want to show up and support them. So I just want to share that too. Cultural competency. This comes up a lot with different, with my clients and also different trainings I do. So I want to make sure that we take time to acknowledge that. So cultural competence is the ability to comprehend, interact, and communicate with individuals, regardless of their cultural background. Cultural competency includes an awareness of one's own cultural views, working at and developing positive attitudes towards cultural differences, and having a knowledge of varying cultural worldviews and practices. I know it's a lot of words, but I think it's really important to me, what I hear is self-awareness, like what's your own cultural views, and understanding that folks that are different than you will have their own different cultural views, perspectives, and background. Culture shapes us in our own lives, and how are we aware of this in our day-to-day operations? I feel like as I work with more nonprofits and more business owners, a lot of the times we forget that this is also a skill set. If you work in an environment where there's a lot of diversity, and you're creating the space for that to thrive, then this is going to be extremely important, because this will come into play in some shape, way, or form. Whether it's designing events for your team and staff, whether it's having meetings at certain times and days or certain places, this will come into play. And I think it's important to kind of keep that in the back of your mind, or in the forefront of your mind, depending on where you're at in your journey. But this is an important skill set to hone in on, be aware of, and see how it shapes you first and foremost, but also how this comes to play in the day-to-day operations of your company. So I just wanted to share that. So any questions on culture competency, inclusive culture, the elements of what that looks like in a work environment? We talked a lot about different things here: empathy, trust, before we dive into psychological safety and a few other things. So I want to check in with folks to see how they're doing, if there's any questions that are popping up, any ahas or insights before we keep going. You can also give me a thumbs up if you're good, if you're okay to keep going as well.
Nothing in the chat so far. Oh, we got a thumbs up.
Perfect. So now we're going to talk about the psychological safety and the bystander effect. And I like to give a little context before we go into this. So we just talked about, inclusive culture and some things to be aware of with fostering that in the work environment. But psychological safety to me is like the next level of making sure that this is put into place as we think about trust, we think about empathy. Without psychological safety, those things will be very challenging to do in a work environment. Also to be mindful of how that plays a part in the workplace and with your team. And the bystander effect is just so cool to me. One day I'm going to find a video to demonstrate this, because we've all seen it. We've all experienced this where you're in a situation and you don't know what to do. And so you might freeze, or you're waiting for someone else to do something, right? So the bystander effect is an interesting phenomenon that, again, we've experienced. But I like to talk about it because in the work environment, this happens often too, where someone might say something inappropriate. Or another example I usually give when we do an activity is someone might, let's say, keep using the wrong pronouns, or someone keeps I don't know, someone keeps doing a behavior that's inappropriate, but no one does anything because it's not like an HR problem. It's just uncomfortable. It makes everyone uncomfortable, and no one knows what to do or say. And so that's why I bring up bystander effect, because this happens all the time. We just don't think about it in the same way as we do in an urgent situation in public, right? We think about in those situations, we think bystander effect, like, oh my gosh, someone fell out. What do we do? Who do we call? But in a work environment, we're like, oh, that's just Bill being silly, or that's just Jane, doing the thing. And so I try to remind folks that it's really important in a work environment to be able to have the ability to say, hey, Bill, let's use the correct pronouns for so and so, or hey, Jane, let's not say that about our coworker. That's not cool, right? And I think what I'm learning is it's important to have the culture to be able to practice that before it becomes a bigger issue than it probably needed to be if someone just said something and spoke up, right? Even if it's one-on-one, it doesn't have to be in front of the whole team. But I think it's really important to have that skill. So that's my rant and intro into psychological safety and bystander effect. So, psychological safety is being able to show and employ one's self without fear of negative consequences of self-image, status, or career. There's four stages to psychological safety. The first one is inclusion safety. Inclusion safety satisfies the basic human need to connect and belong. Learner safety satisfies the need to learn and grow. Contributor safety satisfies the need to make a difference, and challenger safety satisfies the need to make things better. And so it's important, and it's kind of like a matrix or um, where there's like these quadrants, right? And that's kind of how we look at psychological safety of these quadrants or these stages, and where folks feel safe. And especially in the workplace, how are you fostering the space for them to be able to have all of these? Like learner safety is one I like to point out because, you know, how can folks have that balance between making mistakes and learning from them? Because when you're in any role or any part of life, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to miss something or forget something, but how do you learn and grow, right? And so I think it's important for employers to kind of remember that how do we provide that space, that safety for folks to do that, without it becoming a huge problem. But I think it's important to have that spaciousness for folks to be able to like mess up and learn and grow, or to realize like, oh, this is some skills I need to develop further, right? That's really important one I like to share. Um, and then also with making a difference, I work with a lot of nonprofits. So this is really, really important for those environments, but can also translate into, companies and businesses as well. Like they want to make sure that what they're doing is leading to some greater good or some result or a benefit to the company, right? So how is that being fostered? How is that being cultivated and shared? What's the space for that um, to develop with the team. And then challenger safety, which is one I love talking about with leadership teams. Some folks they sometimes when folks question things, right? They question something, or they bring up a question, or they point out something that may not be it may not seem important, but there's the safety for a staff member to bring something up to your attention because they want to make things better, they want to improve something, not because they're trying to get in your business, but because they see a better way to do something, or they're just curious in the different ways to improve something like a process or whatever it is. And so I think that usually makes employers and leadership teams uncomfortable. Like, how dare you challenge me, right? But I think, how do you create that space for that to be a healthy communication or conversation with your team and staff? I'll use myself as an example. I feel like I'm this person. So back before working for myself, I was always someone bringing up ideas like, hey, have you thought about doing this? Or I noticed over here, if we had this put into place, that'd make it easier for this person to do their job, and the client will be happy, right? And some folks love that. They love ideas. And some folks, they take it the wrong way, or they take it like, like you're not happy with the way things are. So how do you foster a space or an environment where they can have challenger safety and it not be in an unhealthy way, but in a way that they really do just want to make things better for their colleagues, the company, or they just have great ideas that they would love to bring to someone. And how do you foster that kind of space for them to do that? So anyway, I just want to explain these four stages of psychological safety, just to get your brain thinking of different ways that we can kind of look at this in a work environment. And like I kind of just said, it's looking at how you do things as a team and organization if you're wanting to nurture psychological safety in the workplace. So here's some examples of how you can do that. Agree to share failures and recognize that mistakes are an opportunity to learn and grow. Being open and honest when expressing gratitude or disappointment. And I would say if it's disappointment, my HR hat's like, is this a conversation? Is this documented? But also, are you giving specific examples of what went wrong and what you would like to see change? It's very important. If you're expressing like, hey, this didn't work because XYZ, and I need to see these three things moving forward. Like be very specific and direct on what went wrong and what you need to see change if you're going to express disappointment. Also, asking for help and freely giving help and support when asked. This is very, very important. And demonstrating this to your team as a business owner or a leadership team is even more important because if they're not seeing you doing that, it's going to be a little bit difficult for them to actually practice this. Embrace expertise among many versus a hero mentality. Very, very important here. Encourage and express gratitude, which reinforces team members' sense of self. Also, I think that by expressing gratitude, I think it's helpful for them to see like not only how they're contributing to the org, and also it's a good reminder of, hey, we value you. We enjoy having you, and here's what you did in your role or what you did today that really solidified like how awesome you are to be part of our team. So I think that's also really helpful too. Any questions or thoughts on psychological safety? Any ahas or insights before we keep going? I love the hearts. Thank you. And then we have this bystander effect. Now, a lot of words here, so I won't read all of this to you, but I really suggest if you want to go down a rabbit hole, I have a lot of resources in the end of this slide deck that you can totally enjoy, you'll get a copy of to dive in deeper. So the definition of bystander effect refers to the phenomenon in which the greater the number of people present, the less likely people are to help a person in distress. So, for example, an emergency occurs, observers are more likely to take action if there are fewer or no other witnesses or folks present. So, being part of a large crowd can make it so no single person has to take responsibility for an action. So, I'll stop here. It looks like we have a question from Shannon. Shannon, do you want to come off mute and share your question or aha or insight? Excuse me.
Sorry, that was an accident. I'm trying to navigate through all of this.
You doing okay so far, though?
Yes, I am doing okay. It's amazing information, wonderful information. Just um a lot of the stuff, of course, with military, things that we are always told to don't be a bystander and how this affects the organization. I love how you're breaking down all this information for us.
Oh, thank you, Shannon. That made my day. Yes, thank you for bringing that up because, like I said, like when I work with different companies, they'll tell me like, here's what happened in a work environment, right? Someone said something that made someone uncomfortable and no one did anything. And now the HR person hears about it like 2 weeks later. And now there's this disconnect of following up and taking action because no one did anything or said anything, right? And so it makes it very challenging. And I think also curious in your opinion on this, but I feel like when you have a team and you're working together, how do you show that you support and are there for one another, right? If you don't say things or you don't speak up when something happens, especially if it's something that can be quickly like mitigated, right? So anyway, all that to be said is where yeah, it's natural for people to freeze or go into shock when seeing someone having an emergency or being whether it's attacked mentally or emotionally. This is usually a response to fear, and I won't break down fear responses because I am not a therapist or psychologist. But if you want to learn more about that, you probably have heard the different, I think it's like freeze, flight, fawn, all the different stages of that responses to fear. So you can look into that if you want. But this is natural for folks to do. And I'll give an example. Like let's say you're at a store, two people are having a really just a loud argument. They're not violent, but they're very, very loud. You can tell they're upset. What do you do? People are stopping and looking, but they're not doing anything. That's an example of where folks can be in the bystander effect. And I think that, again, I think some folks, they just, they just don't know what to do. And so in a work environment, I think because of the closeness and rapport, I think people really struggle with this as well because they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to make it a big deal, and all of that jazz, or they just don't know what to do or say. And hence why we talk about it in today's training. So to make a very long story short, this was first discovered and explained by two psychologists, John Darley and Bibb Latané in 1968. So Darley and Latane proposed that with the increase in the number of people around the person in emergency, the people become less likely to help the one in need. And so they attributed this to two factors: the diffusion of responsibility and social influence. The perceived diffusion of responsibility means that the more onlookers that are present, the less personal responsibility individuals will feel to take action. And social influence just means that individuals monitor the behavior of those around them to determine how to act. And this, my friends, is really important in the work environment. Folks are looking to one another to figure out what to do or say. And that's why I think it's really important to you have to demonstrate what you want to see, especially in a work environment. So if you're not going to allow folks to make sly, comments or jabs or say things that are inappropriate, then you have to say, hey, we don't do that here. We don't allow folks to talk like that about our colleagues, or we don't allow gossip here. So if you have a problem with that person, go take it to that person or take it to HR, please. Like that's what you have to do and say, but it has to be demonstrated by others, especially leadership. So I hope I didn't go down too of a rabbit hole with bystander effect. That's one of my favorite topics that's so important in the work environment and outside of the work environment too. So um, here's a few ways to overcome the bystander effect. And I do this with teams and staff. And so we really kind of dive in deep with a scenarios activity where I have like 6 scenarios. I break people up into groups and they have to figure out how they're going to handle an uncomfortable situation with with a colleague or client. And they're so much fun. So we're not doing that today, but that's usually what I do is I show this slide and then we do activities. But here's some ways to overcome the bystander effect, or you can share this with your staff or your team to help them. So self-awareness, what feelings or fears are coming up for you in the moment? What discomfort do you feel, and why do you feel that discomfort? Being observant, what is happening in your environment? What do you notice verbally, non-verbally? Seeing others as deserving of help. So it's really important that you see that this person needs support, or hey, you want to just check in to see what's happening with them or to them. Don't expect others to be the first to act in a situation. Just saying stop or hey, what's going on? Are you okay? Can prevent further harm or for this to continue further than it needs to. Speak up using a calm, firm, calling in tone. Give others directions to get them involved in helping too. Do your best to ensure the safety of the other person and don't be afraid to seek assistance when you need it. So seek further support from your manager, HR director, team leader, etc. If you're in trouble or you're in a situation, single out an individual from the group, make eye contact and directly ask for assistance instead of making a general plea to the group. This is very, very important, and this is also due to studies um, based on the bystander effect. So they're saying that if you are the person that needs support, you have to basically say, hey, can you come here and do this? That's when people, for some reason, jump in and help. But if you just say, hey, can someone help me? Or hey, I need assistance, generally, it can be a little bit more challenging to get the assistance that's needed. So that was some cool research I did. When training yourself to be an active bystander, it helps to cultivate qualities like empathy, which we talked about earlier. Try to see the situation from other person's perspective. Worry less about consequences of helping and more about the example you are setting for others. And another way to overcome the bystander effect is just witnessing helping behavior. Seeing other folks doing this in your everyday life will make us more willing to help others. So if we see this being demonstrated, then we're more likely to do that. So how can you either practice this in your everyday life or just be observant and notice witnessing others helping others in your everyday life? So any other comments, thoughts, questions on the bystander effect?
Say in the comments, we had a story that said that they said my hubby was mad at me this weekend because I ran to help a man who had passed out, and he was worried that I would get sued for helping the person. I mean, that's just, yeah, a perfect example of what you're saying about being a bystander.
Yes. Yes, I actually, when I did this training last time, um, someone said that they were at a bar or they were at a restaurant that had a bar and they were doing something, probably waiting on their food or waiting to have service. And they saw like an argument happening and they didn't know what to do. Like they didn't know, should they step in? And they kept like deliberating back and forth as to what they should do. And I said, yeah, don't feel guilty that you didn't do anything, you know. And I love that they brought up this example, but it just, I think that, you know, I'm from a small town. So let me just start there. I'm from a small town before I moved to Denver, Colorado. And so these things were kind of like normal for me. Like if you see something, say something. If you notice someone is in distress, like check in, or, you know, like there's just little things that I just always kind of did or thought about. Or if I'm in a situation, I'm in public and I see something, I might say, hey, like, do you see the same thing? Or should we wait for 5 minutes? Or, you know, I'm naturally someone to check in to make sure this person's okay, right? Um, and I've learned that living in a city that is very not that's not the norm. A lot of folks, they do not do that, and I completely understand the possibility of this completely turning a different direction. But I always say it can't hurt to check in. It can't hurt to say, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need something?" Or I'm going to call the authorities to make sure this person's okay, or whatever, right? Like there's something that I can at least try to do, even if it's checking in. So thanks for sharing that story. I really appreciate that, Amber. Um, how are we doing on time? Okay,
About 45
I think we're
minutes
doing okay.
if you want it. Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure. So I believe here is where we're going to talk about allyship. I'm going to kind of skim through this just a little bit because we have one other section of tools and strategies that I want to get to. But I think it's important to talk about allyship if we're talking about fostering an inclusive culture. So ally is a verb. Take action or you will find that you are not just failing the movement, but perpetuating the problem, aka violence with your silence. This is a quote from a blogger called Real Talk Women of Color and Allies. It's a great blog. I think it's on Medium. Check it out if you just want to learn more about this topic, especially when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, and practicing that and living that out. This person has a lot of amazing blogs on the topic if you want to learn more. So, what does allyship look like? What does it mean? So, is an individual with a privileged status that supports efforts to eliminate the systemic oppression that grants them greater power and privilege. Allyship as a strategic mechanism used by individuals to become collaborators, accomplices, and co conspirators who fight injustice and promote equity in the workplace through supportive personal relationships and public acts of sponsorship and advocacy. Look at all those words I highlighted. So I really want folks to understand that ally is like, you know, it's like a status to me, whereas allyship is the action. It's the action of carrying that out. What does that look like? How are you showing up? What does that mean? What actions are you taking to demonstrate that you are an ally in the workplace, in your personal life? To me, it's both. So that's why I wanted to have the differences and definitions between ally and allyship. Allyship is a verb. Ally is who someone is, right? It's part of their status or who they are. So just wanted to share that with you all. And so, steps to becoming a better ally. This is definitely, you know, talking about the workplace, but also I tell all my clients and staff I've worked with that allyship doesn't just start and stop in a work environment. It's also in your personal life. So keep that in mind with everything that I've shared today. It's not just a work environment. But so first, educate yourself. Do your own homework. It can be tempting to simply ask women, people of color, or other folks in marginalized groups about their experiences with inequality and injustice, but that unfairly burdens them with emotional and cognitive labor. An ally takes the time to read, listen, watch, and deepen their own understanding first. So keep that in mind. Own your privilege. Being an ally requires recognizing the advantages, opportunities, resources, and power you've automatically been accorded, while others have been overtly or subtly denied them. This can be painful, but necessary. It's also important to understand what privilege is a resource that can be deployed for good, depending on how you use it. Accept feedback. Deliberately seek feedback from marginalized groups or in your staff and your work environment. Get their feedback, but recognize the power dynamics at play. Even when you're surprised or dismayed by what others tell you, show the value of candor. Be thoughtful and sincere when listening or responding. Become a confidant. Make yourself available. Listen and try to empathize with and validate their experiences. Bring diversity to the table. When meetings are set up, ask whose perspective are we missing, then actively bring in others to share their expertise and knowledge to the conversation. And I want to share this too from a leadership standpoint. I think that we often think that we have all the answers and solutions, but we sometimes forget how a decision is going to impact a team, a role. And so I try to tell folks, like, when you're thinking through things, we're making big decisions, like thinking about, well, who does this impact? And, we ought to get their idea or share this with them and see what their thoughts are. Not that it's going to change everything, but it does kind of bring their experience to the table when discussing certain things. So just something to think about. If you see something, say something. Monitor your workplace for racist or sexist comments or inappropriate behavior, and then be clear and decisive in shutting them down. Don't wait for a marginalized person to react or anyone who is just dealing with the inappropriate situation to react. When you witness discrimination, don't approach the victim later to offer sympathy. Give him, her, them your support at the moment. Remember to overcome the bystander effect by speaking up. And lastly, build a community of allies. Make allyship the norm and default in the workplace. Some folks, they've created employee resource groups, they've created committees, some folks create like JEDI committees. And I think that's also really important. So think about different ways that you can build community where you're fostering allyship and that's part of the workplace. So here is where we're going to wrap up with talk about building your toolkit with strategies and maintaining an inclusive culture. Those are just 5 steps in navigating the difficult conversations. This is what folks really, when I do this training, this is what they're wanting to focus on is how do I deal with difficult conversations? So I tell folks there's a few steps and we've kind of talked about them already, but here they are just plain written down step by step. So first, put yourself in their shoes and consider the situation from their perspective. 2, focus on the problem and issue or goal and be flexible. Also, before I keep going, identify if you're the neutral observer. So are you the person that they're coming to talk about it? Are you the third party? Are you going to be kind of facilitating a conversation with 2 people? Are you the HR person? They're coming to share something that happened. Like, what part of this are you? What role are you, wearing, or what hat are you wearing in the situation? Because it's going to depend. But I just wanted to kind of share like these 5 steps might look a little bit different depending on what hat you are wearing. So like I said, focus on the problem or issue or goal and be flexible. It's important to go into the conversation knowing what your ideal outcome is, but be ready to compromise once you have a deeper understanding of the other person's experience. Or I would say if you are like supporting someone with listening and coming up with ideas on how they should handle it, be mindful that your goal is to get them to the solution of how they should move forward, and you just give suggestions. So kind of keep that in mind there. The objective of the conversation is to reach an understanding first. If you've already have your solution in mind, there's no way for the exchange. There's nowhere for the exchange to go. Of course, you've heard a lot today. Practice active listening. Listen intently and aim to understand the person you are talking to. Ask questions and make a concerted effort not to think about your response while the other person is sharing. And if you have to, write it down. Just let them know that you're trying to practice active listening by not getting distracted by all the questions you have popping up. Check in and take care of yourself and your needs. Tough conversations can be emotionally draining, so be sure that you're taking care of yourself to keep a difficult conversation from turning into a fight or escalating further. Take stock of when you need a break, step out for air, drink some water, or pause the conversation and sleep on it when you need to. And when I share this, everyone is always shocked. But as someone who's been in HR for a minute, sometimes it's like, you know what? We're going to stop here. We're going to put a pin in this. We're going to come back to this at a later date, tomorrow, Friday, whatever. Because sometimes some folks need a moment to step away and reflect. In past trainings, I think I talk about the microwave versus crock pot. So some folks, they may have an immediate response and answer to everything you say. Other folks like myself are a crock pot. We have to sit and simmer and reflect and think and process before responding. So just keep that in mind as well. And then lastly, co-create solutions together. You may believe you have the right solution to fix a problem, but you may come to an even better conclusion with your conversation partner where you can explore solutions or just say, hey, we both agree to disagree and walk away. If you can reach an understanding, create a plan or roadmap toward the solution that works for both of you. That to me is a win. You can end the conversation when you both know what you did your best to find a resolution. And then I have, of course, a note to please seek a third party or mediator if needed, depending on the type of conversation, conflict, or difficult situation that you're needing to address with someone. You do not need to do this alone. You can totally have someone else for support, or just having someone present can be nice who is neutral. So I just wanted to share those 5 steps in navigating difficult conversations. Well, and that is it. So if there's any questions or any ahas, feel free to share them, whether you can come off mute or put them in the chat. If you want to share what your key takeaways are, feel free to do so. If you've learned some new things that you want to share, feel free to do so. But I just want to make sure that we have a little time to kind of wrap up with one another before I do my spiel at the end.
Thank you so much, Otisa. This is so great. Amber in the chat is saying, I'm so a crock pot, which is, yeah, I agree. I'm the same. I think I'm just going to go ahead and stop the recording just in case if anyone wants to say anything off the recording. Do you have anything that you wanted to add while we are recording?
Me?
Yes.
No, but what I'll do is I'll just do this slide real fast. And then if the folks have questions, I can stay on and we can talk. So thanks for those that are joining live, and thanks for those who are watching the recording. It's been great with the series we've been doing since November. I cannot believe it. And if you didn't catch the other sessions, feel free to go online and see the recordings and slides. They're there for your enjoyment. And please give us feedback so we can continue to make other training series that you would like to participate in. Don't be a stranger. Feel free to scan this QR code to stay in touch with me. I'm on social media, all the things. And I have a newsletter. If you want to stay up to date on different things that I'm doing in the world, feel free to do so. And I have my own feedback survey because it's important to me to know what I'm doing well at and what I could also improve upon. So stay in touch with me. And it's been a pleasure offering these trainings for you. And bye for now.